What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Discovering Bob Dylan podcast. Joe here, joined as always by Dylan Seavey, my co-host on this journey. If you're new to the show, here's a quick rundown on what we've been doing. We're talking Bob Dylan albums, every single one from the first. That's where we started, and we are up to the 30th album today. We'll be discussing Time Out of Mind, one of countless Bob Dylan comeback efforts. Mid 90s, early 90s, Bob's stock kind of at an all-time low. Debatable. Maybe it's tough because he's had a couple of these periods. Could be the 80s. Some people could say it's the Christian trilogy. That was his nadir. Maybe it was the 80s. Maybe it's here in the 90s where he's kind of, I think, viewed as sort of an old fossil, no longer relevant. He's not hip to the grunge scene. He's not like Neil Young. He didn't have that kind of rebirth in the early 80s where he was the grandfather, of the whole movement, basically. Got embraced by the kids and all that. He's kind of just like, I don't know, out there. He had his two acoustic albums that we discussed on the last episode. So here we are, 90s, his last album in the 90s. And maybe you can give us some background, Dylan, on just where Bob Dylan was in his life, his career, because he was not popular, not critically beloved at this time. And yeah, what could he do to gain his fans, his people back?
Well, I want to start actually by doing something that I've never done before. For regular viewers of this program, you guys know without trying to ramble too much, we try to cover a lot in a short period of time, and we have so many great commenters on these videos, and every now and then a bunch of people will be in the comments saying, "Hey, you guys didn't even talk about this song," and we miss things. It's the nature of the show, unfortunately, sometimes. This is the first time, hopefully the last time I'll ever have to do this, where I gotta backtrack. We missed something last episode. We did not talk about what is perhaps the greatest album cover of the 1990s. Do you see this, Joe? Have you seen this before other than like a Wikipedia or an All Music or Rate Your Music thumbnail? And what is your response to this complete masterpiece?
I've never seen it in person. I've seen the Wikipedia picture, and that's all. That's pretty spectacular. He looks so haggard there with that like unshorn beard that's real scraggly. Like it's not a great look. Kind of gazing off. He's got
The
some real
look
like
itself.
low-level Photoshop work on the on the
Well,
font.
that for me, I mean, that's the case. Like this graphic design, I mean, actually very similar to Harrison's Cloud 9 with the color palette and the clouds and whatnot. But my God, this is I don't know, it maybe kind of reminds me of like some sort of like Christian psychology book. Um, Maybe like an off-brand like dollar store John Grisham novel perhaps, but I mean, where we're at now, 2024, 32 years, Jesus, after this record is released, we've come so far with Photoshop and other graphic design. But this is truly a relic of an era that it just needed to be called. We needed attention to be called to it, and very, very sorry for not getting to that last time
The
because I
the
just
early 90s was a real low point for album art. I think of like the Springsteen, like Lucky Town and stuff like my
yeah.
Lord, there were some bad looking album covers in the early 90s, especially from like the legacy old school artists.
Yeah, Off the Ground by McCartney is another one. All the feet hanging down. And lots of clouds. That's another one. Off the Ground, it's the big blue sky with the feet hanging down. Maybe because they all think they're gonna die soon. I don't know what it is, but for me, I hold Good as I Bend to You up there with Court of the Crimson King, Sergeant Pepper. When I'm thinking of the best album covers of all times, that's we'll get it in there once more for the
Nailed it.
viewers.
Nailed
Just
it.
remarkable. Okay, back to where we need to be. Because this is a big episode, yeah. And with all due respect to Oh Mercy, I think this is probably the most important episode that we've done in a while since Blood on the Tracks. And therefore, most anticipated episode since then. From a fan's perspective, I'm actually really happy that you brought up that Neil Young comparison because I do think that's important. When you consider someone like Neil Young's chronological timeline, I guess in the early and mid 80s, Neil, he kind of falls out of favor, but not to the degree people don't really talk about those, whatever, Landing on Water, This Note's for You, Life. Like, I don't particularly love any of those records, but, we don't talk about them in the same way that we talk about look how far Dylan fell from grace, look how far McCartney fell from grace. And I think a big part of that is not just how big Freedom was for Neil in 89, but the fact that he was able to align himself with the new guard, the Pearl Jams and someone recently the other day posted a photo of him in the early 90s with a Ween sticker on his guitar. Neil was plugged into the weird stuff, the new stuff. And Dylan, yeah, he had that big concert that we talked about last episode, the 30th anniversary, but most of that was his peers and his immediate influences, your Tom Petty's, your George Harrison's, and actually Eddie Vedder and Mike McCready were there doing an incredible versions of Masters of War. If you've never heard that, definitely worth looking into. They were there, and Sinead O'Connor was there, and people were booing her because she was right about the Pope. But uh, for the most part, yeah, Bob didn't have that same cachet. But from a personal angle, he's definitely tightening things up. Coming off of these two acoustic records, he plays a couple of shows at the Supper Club in New York at the end of '93 that are some of his strongest shows in years. Those shows are highly talked about in the Dylan community as kind of being a major turning point for him. Widely bootlegged. You can hear a particularly great version of Ring Them Bells from those shows on the Telltale Signs bootleg series, Volume 8. They're full band, but largely stripped down and acoustic, really breathing new life into some of his songs again. And eventually the next year, that leads to a spot for him on MTV Unplugged, which is, really solid all the way around. Certainly not as historically prevalent or as game changing as like what Nirvana did with it, or doesn't have the lore behind it like the Alice in Chains one, but really solid performance. You hear Dylan start to be Dylan again. And, I've listened to a lot of bootlegs of Dylan from '95, and that's where the main full band electric concerts, that's kind of where he starts cooking again, like vocally, even, with the more, I guess, haggard voice, he sounds a lot more confident in concert for the first time in years. Uh, Slowly but surely, he's writing original material again in 1996. And that is, I think, that's obviously the bread and butter of Dylan is his songwriting. You know, Neil Young, when people think about Neil Young, yeah, he's an incredible songwriter, but he's also got Crazy Horse, this crazy electric band, really grungy and dirty, 15 years before these other bands. And so that's why he's able to do that. In order for Bob to really get back to this particular heights or this particular pedestal that he's been on before, he's got to deliver the goods because his last album of original material is Under the Red Sky in 1990. Those aren't really the goods. You had Oh Mercy before that, but at this point in time, it's looking more and more kind of like a what's the word I'm looking for? The
Luke.
exception, not the rule. Yeah, almost like a fluke at the time. You've got Knocked Out Loaded down the groove before it. You've got Under the Red Sky. You and I both like the acoustic records, and I think they should be talked about and appreciated more. But in terms of him as a songwriter, they don't offer anything. But now we're getting Time Out of Mind, which comes out in 1997. So That I think for me as a fan looking at it, you see the wheels getting in motion for the comeback, certainly as a performer, and I think his confidence as a performer is going to play into his confidence as a songwriter, as a recording artist. Do you want to talk a little bit about how these recording sessions came to be?
I don't exactly know actually how they came to be as far as like what spurred Bob to get back in the studio and do original stuff again. I know, he worked with Daniel Lanois, but I didn't really see, he was cooking up some fresh songs in Minnesota in like '96,
And that was the
and
first time in quite a while where he was kind of like really demoing stuff himself, with other musicians. I think he's self-producing a lot of those sessions, but he's putting some real care into this, kind of that he hasn't in a while to this degree. Using members of his touring band because again, they're really getting into the swing of things. And at some point, yeah, I have to imagine that not it's not just, oh well, I had good results with Oh Mercy, critically, but also, hey, I needed someone to push me a little bit, and that opens the door for Lanois to come back in.
which, yes, second time with Lanois. What I could read, the recording sessions were a little tense-ish. They didn't quite. I don't know. I don't know if Lanois was pushing him for a specific sound, but Dylan was talking about it, and basically, he said that he doesn't like doing stuff in the studio because he gets bored with the songs pretty quickly, and he doesn't want to do a bunch of takes because he doesn't think that they'll ever be better than the first one. It was the last time Bob would work with an outside producer, which is interesting. He would self-produce, and he had, nice things to say about Lanois, but I think the proof is in the pudding, whereas, he just didn't want to work with him or anyone else ever again. It was all Bob from there on out.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, again, from a production angle, at least, Bob has always worked with top tier engineers. I believe, I think it was Mark Howard engineered this record, and Mark Howard, yeah, he's done so much. He's worked with Lucinda, I'm pretty sure he's worked a lot with Lanois in general, but even moving forward, Chris Shaw, I believe, is the name of the engineer for a lot of the records coming up that Dylan's self-producing. But yeah, he takes the director's chair, so to speak, for every record after this, and he does talk a little bit about his hardships, quote unquote, what he views as the hardships is working with Lanois in his book Chronicles Volume 1, which came out 20 years ago now. We're still waiting on Volume 2. But he talks about it there. And last year, 2 years ago now, there was a Time Out of Mind bootleg series that came out, which includes a fully remixed version of the album to kind of like de-Lanois-ify it. And we'll talk about that when we actually talk about this album and the songs on it. But yeah, I think that goes to show how uncomfortable Bob was. I would argue that the results argue how uncomfortable he probably needed to be to make this happen. Um, but in addition to Lanois, you've got unbelievable studio musician. And you had all these great guests on Under the Red Sky, but now we're back to let's get the big guns in here. You got Jim Keltner and Brian Blade on drums across this record. Bucky Baxter, Duke Robillard, Rhode Island legend, New England, what up? Jim Dickinson, just incredible musician. Augie Myers, great keyboard player, is in there. And I, I think we should dive into it. And I guess the only other things that we should mention are that Bob did have a life-threatening illness or experience. Did you read about this? Make any notes about this?
I did. Although it occurred after.
Did it come after? I thought it happened during the making of it. So,
I believe it was after
Okay.
So that the whole like is this is his death album didn't quite sync up with his actual near-death experience from
Okay.
breathing like river swamp gas, and he got like an infection that almost got his heart. So yeah, I read about that, but I believe that was after
Okay. I
the
had my
album.
timeline mixed up.
Who wants to go first? Should I go first? Maybe I should go first on this one.
Yeah, why don't you go?
Okay.
Where so I gave and I can't remember if I said this to you on camera or off camera. But I asked you because you're a good boy. You never listen to these albums just once. You always give them at least two listens. And I asked you for at least one of your listens to listen to this one late at night, no distractions, lights drawn, either best speakers, best pair of headphones. Take me into your time out of mind listening experience.
All right, first time listening. It was a couple nights ago. I didn't get around to doing this one until pretty recently. Late at night, I don't have the greatest headphones. I must admit that. Just the regular little Apple, little in-ear kind of things. I don't have the best speakers either, so I also canceled Tidal, so I don't have the like the perfect whatever high loss streams or no
Okay,
loss
so
or
we're
whatever.
grading on a handicap here. Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
so basically I tried to do what you asked and mostly just failed. But I got the vibes. It's another, it's a Lanois and Dylan. He wrote a bunch of these lyrics at night. It wasn't recorded at night. It wasn't quite like Oh Mercy. It didn't have that like very New Orleans kind of late night vibes to it. But I think if I didn't know Lanois produced this, like I would know Lanois produced it from listening to it. It's still there. It's still got his fingers on this one. And when I listened to it for the first time, I don't want to like totally spoil my review. Some of it I found very good, very interesting, really good sound. Like you were mentioning, the players on this album, you can have as many slashes and Dawn wases on your album, but that like hired gun approach I don't think really works for a Bob Dylan type because you're not knocking out flashy solos. Like it's more about the overall experience, people kind of reacting to other people and like, oh, here's throwing a little lick or something. It's not like, hey, give me 5 minutes while I solo, it's just not how it works. So I think that obviously a much better experience for making a Bob Dylan album. And this album, half of it I think is quite good. Half of it probably my favorite stuff that he's done since 1980, since Saved. I think obviously his skills with lyrics, I don't know if they ever totally went away. Like obviously he still had the juice on No Mercy. Nobody can explain under the red sky. That was just an aberration. I think these are some of his best atmospheric lyrics, but he can also knock off like a real simple one, like "Let Me Feel Your Love," which I knew it was a Bob Dylan song. I didn't realize it was on this album. I know the
What'd
Adele
you just call it? Make you feel my love?
make make you feel my love. Why did I say make you feel my love? Is that really what it's called? Make you feel
It is, believe it or not, it is called that and has always been called that.
interesting. Very interesting. Okay, make you feel my love. I don't know why I read the wrong thing. Maybe it was an autocorrect thing. Very simple lyrics, kind of like I want you type, sort of just like reducing it down to the very basics, which some critics didn't like this one. I think Chris Scow had a problem with it, but I think it's nice to see Bob just kind of slumming it with the pop songwriters. Just make it simple, make it nice. It sounds great. This, however, is an album for me of like two very different sides. Like you got the gritty, bluesy numbers, the Tom Waits kind of, and that's the problem I have with this album. I'll just get it out there. The bluesy stuff, the kind of Tom Waits adjacent, gritty, smoky, kind of noir sounding bluesy stuff. I just don't like it very much. I don't, gravitate towards that style at all. I think, the playing is pretty boring most of the time. It's pretty rote. It sounds good, but like they're just kind of jamming on a typical blues stuff. And I don't know, it just does nothing for me, which is a shame because I really do like the more ballad stuff, the swirlier, hazier, Lanois touched songs. Um, Lanois, I think, again, wanted to kind of reach back into the past and grab some of Bob's like greatest hits. Like he wanted to channel Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands for Standing in the Doorway. And Bob was like, I don't know. But I think that vibe is there. It's not, a copycat or anything like that. But, I get some of that classicness out of, the more ballad stuff. I don't know. It's hit or miss because you start out with a great track, like Lovesick, which I think is a very strong opener. It's a little bluesy, but not like the really bluesy stuff like Dirt Road Blues, which is the second track, which takes me like right out of it. And you kind of go through that off and on. It's like, okay, Standing in the Doorway is probably the best track he did in the 90s. I think has a great strong chorus, a little lift, is just downright pretty. Love the shimmering organ on it. I love the organ in general on this album. I think it sounds great. The instrumentation is great. People complain that it was too reverby and too much effects on his vocals and stuff. I don't really hear that. I think it's less so than Oh Mercy. And I think, it accentuates and does a nice job surrounding Bob Dylan's voice. But I think his voice sounds really good for a late period type of album. It's ragged and withered, but I think it suits this music a lot better than, sort of the semi try to be a pop music or whatever he was writing on, Under a Red Sky. I think this he's really settled into his limitations and what he can do in 1997, 35 years into his career. I think he's found his voice, and if I recall, he kind of sticks with that for a while. Even the blues stuff I think sounds good. Like the instrumentation is great. It's very classic Bob Dylan. It's very rich, full palette. Um, love the sounds of the acoustic guitars, love the sounds of the organs. There's a ton of like little, just little riffs and passages that you can hear kind of going off in the background around Bob. And you can just tell that everyone involved in this record is just supremely talented, which is great. All that stuff's good. But I just don't really like songs like Million Miles, just like very old school blues sounding. Trying to Get to Heaven, I think is pretty good. It's got some like chimey 50s style guitar, but it also has that swirly Lanois production. So it actually it feels kind of out of time. Most of this record, it's very like 50s, 60s. It doesn't sound, modern really. I mean, it has some of that modern production like technique, but like I think what they're going for and lyrically, it's kind of like old school 50s, 60s stuff. I can't wait, another kind of bluesy one that I don't really like too much, but I think Cold Iron's Bound is pretty good. It's got a little anger to it, which not bad. It's 7 minutes though, it's too long. And then Highlands, the last track, 16 minutes. It's too long. It's way too long. This is a very long album, 72 minutes, 11 songs. A lot of, kind of what I've always had trouble with about Bob, the bluesy stuff, the longer songs. But I do think the tunes where he's in not blues mode, where he's kind of doing the Oh Mercy style ballads, the swirly production, the great playing, Lovesick, Standing in the Doorway, Trying to Get to Heaven, Not Dark Yet, Make You Feel My Love, I think are all very strong songs. It's nothing really that he's doing that kind of irks me. It's just the stylistic is not my favorite on half of this album. Other half's great, half of it I don't need to ever hear again.
Whew, okay. Well, I will start by saying I always, regardless of how similar or different we feel, I like to find some common ground to lead with, to show you that, look, I'm here with you, I'm working with you, we're working together. You're putting in the effort, so I'm gonna put in the effort too. I think that Highlands is cool, and every time I listen to it, I tend to like zero in on like a different series of verses to it. There's some funny stuff in there about the waitress and the eggs and everything like that. And if I'm listening to the album as a whole, even though it's the final song, I won't skip it. I'll listen to it. But it doesn't interest me as much as a lot of his other epics, and a lot of his other epics, even when they're super long like this one, Desolation Row is technically repetitive. It's just a bunch of verses after, but between the melody and, the acoustic guitar playing and certainly what's happening lyrically, I don't think about Desolation Row being long. Highlands is a song, and I am a blues fan. I'm a blues defender. I will take issue with some of what you just said about this record, but this is one with Highlands where I'm like, yep, it's a 16-minute blues progression, not a lot happening dynamically. I'm impressed by the band's ability to stay at a particular level. The writing's fine. I don't know. Some Dylan fans will tell you there will be at least three or four in the comments of this video saying Highlands is one of his masterpieces. I like it. Not a masterpiece. In my opinion, should it say. For
That's it.
me,
That's the only nice thing you're gonna say. Everything else
no,
coming
no,
from
no,
my
no, no.
throat. I knew it.
No, you hit on some other. I think that Not Dark Yet deserves a bit more than just mentioning it in passing. I think that Not Dark Yet is one of the most harrowing sets of lyrics you ever. I mean, the phrase itself, it's not dark yet, but it's getting there, is like such a knife to the heart. But everything else, every other lyric in that song, I think that Not Dark Yet is one of the tightest lyrical songs he's written in some time. Maybe since Joker Man, where like every line is just unbelievable. And those, I'm glad that you were able to catch on to that, standing in the doorway trying to get to heaven. I mean, I think these songs are just hair raising. I mean, the emotional depth of these songs, proof that he can write a heartbreaker as good as anyone else still. And, like you said, make you feel my love. I believe the phrase you just used was, oh, he'll slum it down here, with these other songwriters writing a simple. So Dylan's version of slumming it with the other ones is writing a song that has literally already become a modern day standard. You know, he slums it. He resorts to this other level, and oh, here's a song that Garth Brooks and Adele and Billy Joel and like literally hundreds of people are gonna cover because oh yeah, I can do that too. And oh, you think like, oh yeah, here's a bunch of blues progressions, but also here's one of the most gorgeous little descending melodic progressions I've written in some time. And I love his voice, especially on these melodic songs. Yeah, it's got the growl, but I think the haggardness to me, like I've mentioned 1,000 times before, it really just showcases his humanity to me. This is a guy who's lived a hard friggin' life. He's 56, 57 years old, whatever, when he's recording these songs. And I mean, he sounds older at that age than a lot of other rock stars get to their 50s. McCartney puts out an album this year. He's a year younger than Bob. He puts out Flaming Pie in 97. Paul's voice on Flaming Pie sounds, I don't want to say as good as it ever has, but he still sounds like Paul McCartney. Sounds awesome. You hear some of these rock stars who are still alive today, maybe Springsteen never had the best voice in the world, but still pretty much sounds like Springsteen. To hear Bob sounding like this, singing Make You Feel My Love, Not Dark Yet Trying to Get to Heaven, to me, it feels so human, and there is a big thread of mortality running throughout this album, and it's certainly not the last album that will see that from Bob, but I think you really feel it. And to me, I just think there's so much brilliance in his writing with all of these songs. And then with the bluesier stuff, man, I just like, for me, songs like, especially Till I Fell in Love with You, like, to me, they're just so effortlessly groovy and engrossing. And like, it doesn't stray far enough to call into question like the authentic bluesiness of it, but it doesn't exactly settle for complete cliche either. I mean, the organ sounds, the drum sounds, the guitar sounds, like it doesn't just sound like some guy trying to do a BB King ripoff, you know. It doesn't sound like what, you know, Joe Bonamassa is trying to do half the time, or anything like that. You know, it sounds different and cool. Um, and I love that. And yeah, a song like Lovesick, man. I mean, so much dynamic intensity in that song. For me, like perfect opening song. Hair stands up on my on my arms sometimes when I listen to that song. It's so intense, but it never really raises above, other than the ba you know, those hits into the chorus there. I also have a great memory with Lovesick. So I've seen him 13 times at this point, but one of the times I saw him back in Memphis in 2013, it was a quadruple bill. The Richard Thompson Electric Trio opened the show. My Morning Jacket played, Wilco played, Bob Dylan played. The Americana Rama tour, they called it. And Richard Thompson, incredible. My Morning Jacket and Wilco, two of the best live bands of the last 25 years, obviously incredible. Bob Dylan comes on. And the first song, he is like full cliche, like, and even for me at this point, I've probably seen him 10 times, and I can tell, like, oh, he's not really putting in the effort. But I was also close enough where I could see him like scanning the crowd with this mindset of like, I know that you guys are just here for the younger bands and you think you're gonna see this cool legacy act playing Blown in the Wind on his acoustic guitar. So I'm gonna sound like shit and weed you guys out. And sure enough, people kind of started leaving. And second song, they go into Lovesick, and he's kind of keeping it up, you know, walking streets of death. Well, but halfway through the song, he had this look in his eye, looking out at the crowd. It gets to like the second chorus, the but he jerks his whole body into motion. The whole band rises up with him. He sings the rest of the set in the clearest voice I've ever heard him sing in live. It's like, all right, I got everyone else left who's here for me. So let's go. Dick move? Probably. I loved it.
No, I'm fully on board for that kind of just that's awesome. That's like a true I don't want to say the word, but like you know, like he's a guy who will do that. He did it in his albums, he did it in his career. Like you can just tell he just wants to mess with people and just,
Yeah.
you
Total Chad move. It was
know.
really, really great. But yeah, I think it's an unbelievable opener. You know, I've heard that complaint about Dirt Road Blues before too. I think Dirt Road Blues sounds awesome. I love it, like almost like an Elvis Costello organ that comes in with it, that really bright, like lots of high end on it. I think it rolls along so nicely. But again, like this is where I'm willing to concede with you and other people. Like if this sort of like, I guess if you want to call it quote unquote classic, authentic sort of bluesy thing isn't your thing, I can respect that. I think that Bob does such a great job with it. And I think that track in particular is really cool. And with the blues songs in general, as well as, you know, the other more kind of ballad personal songs, I do think that Lanois provides such a swampy magic with the production. I think he's utilizing the exact right amount of reverb, textural coding to just sonically enhance everything. And to me, it does sound different than Oh Mercy. You know, similar, and like you said, like you kind of know Lanois when you hear it, and depending on the project, that may be your thing, it may not be your thing, but To hear, I think this particular reverb dripping off of Bob's vocals um, just sounds so damn good. And the remix from last year, or the year before, it's good, but to me, it's not as interesting. It's the same as the All Things Must Pass remix to like despecterize it and like, I guess I get why some people feel that way, but to me, that's the sound of the album. But yeah, I like these tunes. I'm somewhat with you on Million Miles. It's not my absolute favorite. I dig it, and I dig Can't Wait. There's an outtake of Can't Wait that I think is slightly better. It's kind of more like piano based, a little more chill. Actually, probably pretty Joe core as far as this album goes. I should have sent that to you, but I don't know. I think the band sounds great. I think the production's great. For me, I think that Cold Iron's Bound. Fuck you for saying it's too long. I think it is one of the deadliest combinations in his catalog of instrumental and musical virtuosity and just sheer friggin' coolness. The bass line, Tony Garnier's bass line on that song is one of the coolest, most hypnotic bass lines I think ever. And especially, in Dylan's catalog and just this tidal wave of guitars and organs keeps swirling and crashing. And David Kemper on drums is doing this sweet, sort of like New Orleans, Bo Diddley, irresistible groove going around Garnier's bass line, all the guitars and organs crashing in around it. Um, I think it's phenomenal. It's a top 10 Dylan track for me. Doesn't feel a second too long. It feels just like this roller coaster that's going up and up and up and up and up, and like it never fully goes down. I think it is a sonic achievement and killer lyrics on it too. I mean, I think this is where Bob, people I just used it 3 or 4 times, so I'm going to contradict myself, but I actually don't love using the word cool to describe things, probably because I am so viscerally uncool, that I don't know. I feel like it's a term that people use, I think sometimes to attach it to something. It's a very hipster phrase. We'll call it what it is. Like, oh, if something's cool, it's one of the reasons you've always rebelled against the Velvet Underground. And I love the Velvet Underground, but like I do think that sometimes the attitude around it, the coolness factor of it, I'm not so interested in that. People talk about Bob all the time, like, oh, look how cool Bob was in the 60s, the sunglasses. He doesn't give a fuck what people think, playing with the reporters' cigarettes. There's kind of a second type of Dylan coolness that comes into play in later years. And to me, that's what I hear in Cold Iron's Bound. A guy who, again, we haven't heard consistently super confident in so long. And when he is singing this song, especially when it gets to the last verse, where he sings like, "You've no idea what you did to me," like the venom, it's like, there it is. There's the Bob that I used to know, but now it's in this haggard, like I officially am at a point in my life where I can't afford to give a fuck about anyone else or anything else. I've got this killer producer and this killer band playing this unbelievably engrossing song around me. What are you gonna do about it? I think it's unbelievable. You know, Not that this is any lyrical slouch. Lyrically, my favorite track on the record, probably Standing in the Doorway or Not Dark Yet. I mean, uh, I got to pull up the lyrics here for Standing in the Doorway, but there's one in particular. Yeah, I eat when I'm hungry, drink when I'm dry, and live my life on the square. And even if the flesh falls off my face, I know someone will be there to care. It always means so much, even the softest touch. I see nothing to be gained by any explanation. There's no words that need to be said. You left me stand in the doorway crying, blues wrapped around my head. It just it's Bob. And same thing with Not Dark Yet. I was born here and I'll die here against my will. I know it looks like I'm moving, but I'm standing still. Every nerve in my body is so naked and numb, I can't even remember what it was I came here to get away from. Don't even hear the murmur of a prayer. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. I mean, that's
And listen, no one's saying that these lyrics aren't great. As usual, when it comes to Bob, it's just about a stylistic difference
yeah.
in what I like and what he's playing. And, I think this is a 3.5 star album for me. I'm not, it's not like a bad album. It's my favorite since, I'll say, Saved, Shot of Love, maybe, kind of on that same level. But to me, I mean, it's just the days of Bob Dylan being that interesting to me are just over. Like that was a 70s thing. Here in the 80s or here in the 90s, here in the 90s, in the 80s, I think going forward, it's just, he's very much in that old school, not really going to give you a bridge. The melodies, sometimes they're nice, but they're not really there for the most part either. Nothing. I mean, there's nothing, no melodies on this album that I'd be humming, the next day. There's nothing inherently catchy about any of it. I think there's some, cool playing and some good lyrics and some good singing. And for blues, I think this is good stuff. It's not Stevie Ray Vaughan, but, it's as interesting as you can make the blues, I think, outside the 70s and the 60s, 50s, maybe. So I think I might like Love and Theft more. I think that might get to 4 for me because I do remember liking it. But this one, I don't know. Maybe it's the Tom Waitsiness that I hear in the blues numbers. Just not loving it. I respect the hell out of it. It's a great comeback. I get why the critics loved it. Just not quite for me.
I think Make You Feel My Love is pretty damn catchy. I think Trying to Get to Heaven's pretty damn catchy, but
I mean,
that's just
it's
me.
pretty catchy, but then, I'm familiar with the Adele version and the Adele version. Now that's catchy.
It's the same melody.
Yeah, but she just sings it in a way that really sticks with you.
Yeah, I do like Adele's version. I almost can't even say someone, funnily enough, asked me about this the other day. Someone who came into the record store that I worked at who said, I've seen you before on YouTube, which was, always nice. Um, so we started talking about Bob. I said, yeah, we're doing Time Out of Mind soon. And so we were just talking about it and they asked me, do you prefer Bob or Adele doing Make You Feel My Love? I'm like, I feel like you can't even compare those two things. I mean, I listened to Bob's version more because I like Bob more, but I mean, every time I've ever heard Adele's song, I'm like, yeah, that's a friggin' great vocalist singing a great song. I don't have anything to complain about. But I sent you some good news the other day via text message. I said, Joe, after this, there aren't going to be any more times that I can think of off the top of my head where I'm going to be sending you any alternate takes here. We've been at this for probably 15 or so albums like, oh, you got to listen to this alternate take and this outtake and yada yada. We're mostly done with that. But I did have to send you the 4 songs that didn't make the cut for this album. Did you listen to those songs?
I did. I like them. I didn't. This is another one where I knew Mississippi
Okay.
because Sheryl Crow covered it on the Globe Sessions,
Yep.
which I think is a very underrated album. Really like it. I really like her version of Mississippi, and I think Bob's is pretty good. I think I prefer Sheryl Crow's version, as horrible as that may sound.
No, 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 hold up, hold up. There will be no Sheryl Crow slander at any point on this show. I this version of Mississippi of Bob's is very, very special to me. It's my favorite version of it, but disagreements aside on that one song, if anyone in the comments wants to slander Cheryl, be my guest. I will not be participating in it. Those first three show records you can't fuck with. They're fantastic.
Okay. Uh, and that sort of made me think is like, are we back to an era, much like those early couple records where, I really like the underlying construction of these songs.
Mm.
I'm glad someone else is doing them, kind of like the Byrds did with the early Bob Dylan stuff when he was just doing the acoustic numbers,
The most
with the Adele
underrated
song,
band of
with
all time. Yeah, the Byrds. Of
Bingo,
course.
with the Sheryl Crow, with the Adele. Maybe I just want to hear these songs done by, a younger, better voiced kind of artist that maybe does it in a more contemporary style that better suits my own musical taste. Because I mean, these are great songs. I just prefer when other people do them. And I got that flashback to, episode 3 where I was shitting on the other side of Bob Dylan because I just want to hear the Birds versions. And now we have
Yeah,
Sheryl Crow. We've come full circle.
here we go.
Bird, Crow. We-
Yeah. Yeah, the McGuinn to Crow pipeline strikes again.
Mhm.
Uh, did you have any notes written on Dreamin' of You, Red River Shore, Marching to the City by any chance?
Nothing beyond the, I mean,
Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so for me personally, I also really like all these songs. We'll we'll talk about Mississippi more next episode because spoiler alert for any of those not in the know, he re-records it, ends up on Love and Theft.
Ooh.
Um, which yeah, I guess maybe you didn't know. There, nice little on-camera reveal. I really, really love this particular version of Mississippi, but we can talk about it more next episode. Dreamin' of You, I think, is supremely cool. Really cool piano line in that song. Another great groove. And the demo of it, or this version of it, yeah, these are all in the Telltale Signs bootleg series I mentioned earlier. I don't think they ever made it to the full Landwa production stage. You could tell they're a little more, I guess, I don't know if organic is the right term, but they're not as reverby, they're not as produced it sounds. But Dreamin' of You has a really killer groove on it. Red River Shore is a beautiful song. Marching to the City is cool, but unlike Shot of Love and Infidels, where you and I are sitting here talking about like how come these songs made it and these songs didn't. I don't think that this album necessarily suffers from not featuring these songs because as much as I love Mississippi, it feels so different than anything that's on Time Out of Mind that I struggle to think about where I would want to place it on the record. And there are other versions of Mississippi from this time. For all the nerds like me out there watching, I sent Joe the alternate version #1, where it's basically just a little bass and a little guitar. There are other full band versions of Mississippi that are cool, but all of them I don't know where it would fit. Red River Shore, same thing. Like, maybe taking the place of Highlands at the end, but that one lyrically evolved into Standing in the Doorway. March into the City lyrically evolved into Till I Fell in Love with You. So for me, I'm fine with valuing these as like strong outtakes. And that's okay. I'm very satisfied with the track list. I guess I'm happier at 3.5 stars. That's a full star and a half lower than me. This is an easy 5 star record for me. I think it deserves all the praise and accolades that it's received for the last 2.5 decades. I think it is rightfully heralded as a crowning moment in his discography. And I also don't think that what this record did for his career can be overstated because this album was very well received, which means for the most part, we've talked about our last critically panned or critically overlooked records. From here on out, Bob is back in the good graces. And a lot of that is the record. A lot of that is, again, the live performances. His live performances, again, from like 95, 96, all the way up, I think through like '03 or '04 are so consistently strong. He's nominated for Grammys for this record. He has a infamous performance of Lovesick at the Grammys where a guy performance artist crashes the stage, soy bomb written on his chest, and you can see Bob just sort of laughing in the corner of his eye. And I'm sure someone wanted to go and get him off, and Bob was like, "No, it's fine. He's cool." He's in a Victoria's Secret commercial around this time, which is one of the more hysterical, amazing things that's ever happened. He's back, and it's because of this album. Regardless of my opinion on it, your opinion on it, it just can't be overstated. It's the Renaissance record of all Renaissance records. Infidels kind of got its flowers. Oh Mercy kind of got its flowers, but Time Out of Mind is where it's at.
Yeah, it seems like it's on a whole different level from those records because basically since then you can't say a negative thing about Bob Dylan without getting just ripped to shreds by, everybody because critics went crazy for it. It's just A's, A pluses, 5 stars across the board. Pitchfork even, they couldn't say anything bad about him. And that would continue with our next album, which we'll be talking about, Love and Theft in 2001, and pretty much continues to this day. I mean, his last album was, album of the year by a whole bunch of places. I think it has like a 98 out of 100 on Metacritic. Like, if Rough and Rowdy Ways 2020, he's still on this streak that started here with Time Out of Mind, where he is once again a major player, not just a legacy artist, not just the guy who wrote Blown in the Wind. He's still an artist that can be looked to for new songs and new ideas. And sure, I'm with it. I'm happy for him, and I'm happy for you, and for all the critics who can give him 5-star albums.
On behalf of the entirety of the Bob Dylan fandom, I'd like to extend our gracious appreciation. But I truly don't think you have heard your last Bob Dylan record that is going to surprise you at how much you like it. I don't know how many there will be. And I'm not just saying this because I want to keep our viewers who are maybe watching at home and saying, well, Joe just said he thinks he's officially done and we got 10 more albums. No, 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 no. I think there's going to be one in there. And even with the ones that you may not love, I mean, we have some fun ones to talk about. But this next record, like you said, Love and Theft, may be might be one of those times. So yeah, you've mentioned before that your mom was a fan and she played this record, and you've got some positive recollections of it.
Yes, I've heard all of it, but probably not for 20 years. But when I heard it, and I was, not a Dylan fan by any means back then, I do remember being pleasantly surprised and saying, commenting to my mom, talking with her that, oh, this is pretty good for Bob Dylan, and slap me across the face. But yeah, I have pleasant memories of this one, and this really the first time I can say that in his whole catalog, really. I mean, maybe since like Nashville Skyline, where I could be like, you know what, yeah, this one I do like, and that
Do
was
you
before I liked Bob Dylan.
do you
But
want
we'll
me
see
to
right now.
retroactively call CPS for when she slapped you in the face for that
Yes,
comment?
please,
Okay.
please.
I'm calling on behalf of my 37-year-old friend dealing
39, 39.
39. Oh,
Yeah, I'm old.
oh,
I'm
bud.
old.
I wouldn't have done this show if I, I knew there was that big. Nah, I'm 33. I'm getting up there too, and now I'm excited for everyone in the comments to be like, "You guys are young. Don't don't bitch about it." Anyway, we're young and beautiful, and we know it. But um, Bob wasn't as young, but I think still beautiful when he did Love and Theft, and I think I guess what I'll tell you to keep in mind here is, going back to what we were talking about before about, Time Out of Mind being the last record with him using, an outside producer. Keep in mind, I would say listening to Love and Theft, that what you're hearing officially is the Bob Dylan that Bob Dylan is intending to get across. Not even just, whatever, lyrically or compositionally, but sonically and arrangement wise. This is Bob, or should we say Jack Frost, at the helm. So yeah, I would say, for the first time in a minute, we're hearing pure unadulterated Bob. And I personally think pure unadulterated Bob, when he's kind of flailing in the 80s, is a lot different than Bob in 2001, where he's got his mojo back, confidence wise across the board. So
Well, I will keep that in mind when we listen to Love and Love and Theft. You got to put
yes,
some quotes on it
you got to
because
do it.
it's in the title, Love and Theft. We listening
Yeah.
to that one for the next episode. I feel like I'm gonna get excoriated comments for my opinions on Time Out of Mind, even though I'm at 3.5 stars, which means it's good.
Yeah, you will, and rightfully so, but at the same time, I'm always I love reading the comments and seeing who excoriates me. I believe to this date, the last video we have released is our top song of the 80s, and I love seeing the comments saying, "Oh, Joe gets it." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Sorry that my opinion's
How
valid."
fickle the audience is, how quickly they will turn on
But
you.
I hope everyone knows I tend to respond to people very sarcastically and shortly. I want everyone out there to know that I and Joe both genuinely appreciate all of the feedback and all of the communication that we get. It means a lot that people are still watching this after this many episodes. And, Joe will give the full plugs here in a minute, but you can talk to us all the time, even more, if you donate to the Taste Like Music Patreon, get access to the Discord. We are both there chronically, way too much, way more than functioning human adults should be. But we really, really appreciate you. And we appreciate our friend, is it Ken?
Ken Silverstone, our patron, basically, who's been giving us super likes for basically every single episode. So, gotta
Appreciate you,
shout
Ken.
out to Ken. He is our favorite commenter because he gives us money, and that's the kind of world we live in. It's a material
It
world,
is.
baby.
And also, so I don't have to do a mea culpa next episode. Also, pretty classically 90s here, I think, with the font and the design, but definitely still better. I do like the ghostly Bob that goes, kind of goes with all the lyrics about death and whatnot.
We probably don't have time to talk about it now because this episode's stretching on into, well, it's day now, but it could be night soon. Uh, why he's always out of focus in his album covers. Like
Well, not
what,
on the back though. Look at those clear blue eyes on the back.
looking pretty there. But
He looks
yeah,
really
another
pretty.
album cover where he's just out of focus. It's just like I don't get it, Bob.
The
We'll have to
mystique.
ask him if we, can get him on the show. I'll call him up, see what he's
Any
doing
day now.
any day. Just waiting for that return phone call, Bob. Any day.
Come on now.
Um, all right, let's end this. Listen to Love and Theft for next time. Leave your comments on this episode, on my feelings on Time Out of Mind, where it ranks for you, what you think about it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, check the description, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram,
Blue Sky.
Patreon, Blue Sky, yeah, Blue Sky, Threads, whatever. Just hit us up somewhere. Someone will respond to you at some point. And yeah, we will see you next time here on the Discovering Bob Dylan podcast when we tackle Love and Theft. See you then.